The weight of his expectations felt like a suffocating blanket over my choices. The weight of his expectations felt like a suffocating blanket over my choices. My dad and I have always had a complicated relationship. He divorced my mom when I was just a baby, and she passed away when I was only 5 years old. Since then, he remarried and had another child, expecting me to forget about my mom entirely and assimilate into his new family. There was a big effort to ignore my grief, to expect me to move on as if nothing had happened. His dismissal of my childhood grief still stings like an open wound. When I was 13, he sat me down and suggested his wife adopt me. He mentioned how she had raised me far longer than my biological mom, and it was time for me to acknowledge her as my real mother. When I refused, he threw a tantrum, stomping his foot and pouting before storming out, and the subject was never mentioned again. But that strain was always palpable. His wife died 3.5 years ago, right when I was engaged and planning my wedding. 6 months later, he questioned how I could move forward with the planning. I told him I still wanted to get married, despite his expectation that the wedding would be delayed for years. He never brought it up again, but it seems he just held it all in, waiting for another chance to assert his grief over my life. Now, my wife is pregnant with our first child, a little girl. We've agreed to name her after my mom, as it's a nature name that perfectly fits what my wife wanted. We haven't announced it yet, but during a recent family dinner, someone asked if we had a name picked out. I said we weren't sure, wanting to wait until she was born. My dad jumped in, assuming we were hiding that we'd name her after his late wife. I told him he didn't know that at all. His temper flare-up was a harsh reminder of the control he's always tried to exert. He lost it, yelling that if I had any respect for our family, I'd name her after his wife. He told me he was grieving, my siblings were grieving, and I should take that into consideration. I retorted that it had nothing to do with what my wife and I chose for our child. He wanted to talk one-on-one, and I agreed. He told me if I was hiding the name, I must be choosing that woman, my biological mom, and that it was inconsiderate given his wife had raised me and only died 4 years ago. He said a good son would honor his father's beloved wife. Naming my daughter after my mom felt like reclaiming my own story, and I told him his grief does not get to dictate the name my wife and I choose for our child. I reminded him that my grief at the age of 5 didn't matter to him, so why should I put his adult grief first now? I told him there'd be no more discussing baby names, it was none of his business. He's accused me of invalidating his grief and being insensitive to it. My emotions are a tangled mess of honor, love, and resentment. Ida for standing firm on naming my daughter after my mom, despite my dad's grief.